We don't serve your type either.
What's up, meta nerds? This video will be a complete breakdown of the Sullustan species, looking at everything from their homeworld, biology, history, culture, and importance in the galaxy at large, pulling from all canon and legend sources. But first I want to thank Bright Sellers for sponsoring this video. It's like having a personal online sommelier. You take a quick 7-question quiz, matching your taste palette to the best wines from all over the world. I got the 6-bottle package, and they've really found a way to bring this 8,000-year-old human experience into the 21st century, making it even more social and informative too with these little cards. I first laughed at this one, like they're really trying to appeal to newbies with how to open the bottle instructions, but then was humbled by the third part. Didn't know the optimal date range to drink once it was opened, or that most wines should be consumed when released and not aged. And these little cards make it really fun. Something about them made me want to catch them all, and it was really cool to read up on where the wine was made, how it was made, the flavors, profile, optimal temperature, and pairing suggestions. And at the very bottom you got that QR code to rate it. Have everybody rate it while you're drinking it so you don't forget, so that your wine selection becomes even more and more personalized, and make it so that each shipment just keeps getting better and better. It's a very fun and unique experience, your online sommelier and feeling like the winery came to your house. You gotta give it a try, so please use our link down below. Thank you again, Bright Sellers, for giving my followers a limited time offer of 50% off their first 6-bottle box. Click on the link in the description to get started. Let's get back to the video. The Sullustans got their name from their homeworld, Sullust. Located at coordinate M17, the Prima sector of the Outer Rim, the Sullust system contained 1 sun and 5 orbits, with Sullust in the 4th position. At first orbital was a gas giant with 18 moons named Solomon, followed by Nunb, with a similar gas composition but with 34 moons. Followed by an asteroid field, Sullust and its 2 moons, Solon and Nunb, and the last was the rocky planet Nunb. This space geography will prove important to its history as these gases, asteroids, and habitable planets and moons all in the Outer Rim proved very difficult to control. Heading down to Sullust, we find a world with a 20-hour day, 263 days in a year, and a diameter about the same as Coruscant at 12,780 kilometers. Unlike Coruscant, most species would need to pack a breathe mask, as it is a Type 2 atmosphere. Type 4 had one or more aspects of their atmosphere that made them toxic, flammable, or had high or non-existent pressure, making them completely inhospitable to almost every species. And while Type 1 was suitable to almost all species, Type 2 and 3 were along this continuum, with the Keldor species homeworld Doran making it so Luke wore a mask when visiting, and other Type 2 worlds included Mustafar. Humans could breathe in it, but there would be negative long-term health effects. Volcanic activity was the same issue here on Sullust, generating hot and thick clouds of toxic gas that swept over the surface with varying intensity. It was near impossible to get a weather prediction, so there was always the worry of getting caught in a gaseous breeze that was either so hot it burned out your eyes and lungs, or you just fell unconscious from the gas itself. Some spots were worse than others, and we'll see how some surface level industry was achieved, but it isn't like there were some lush, peaceful parts of Sullust. Their entire world was covered in mountainous terrains with some rocky deserts and countless volcanoes. They had no classification for a truly dormant volcano. Some had not blown in decades or centuries, but no one ever trusted that they were completely safe. While the massive volcanoes were continuously pouring out like rivers that stretched across the planet and connected all over the surface, making for lakes and oceans of lava. It may seem impossible for life to form here, and there was a spot called the Slime Sea that was a thick, disgusting liquid, which may have given rise to early life. But if you move beneath the surface, you will find a cave system that expanded into huge open spaces, all connecting to each other in a labyrinthian complex that stretched throughout the world. It is possible that at some point in the distant past, early life forms were spread out all across Sullust, and when the surface turned into a hellscape, there could have been a combo of some life getting trapped down below, and others choosing to move into these caves, where they would then further branch off down evolutionary lines. Because some of these animals seem normal, while others seem thoroughly bred by the flames, like the ash angel, a large predatory bird that could extract everything it needed by eating the ash, and it would excrete it out like a sweat, creating a haunting image that was sought after by birdwatchers all across the galaxy. There was also the rock render, which would just eat rocks, absorbing minerals to survive. There were some predatory snakes and lizards, and others like the Drutash grub seemed to be native to the caves. But there are things like the alv, which are like butterflies, and tons of herd animals like the curl-nose, mim, and others that don't get a name, along with the sand cat, which would become loved all across the galaxy for its ridiculously large grin when fat and happy. And besides the domesticated animals, there was also simple animal technology, like a canary in a coal mine. They had the Selous snake in a mineral mine, releasing the harmless creatures en masse, and as they called the caves home, the Sullustans could use them like poison gas sensors. If the Selous was comfortable, you were safe, but if you saw any changes, you knew that the latest volcanic activity caused a leak. So either they and many of these herd animals evolved on the surface when storms were lightning and water, not poison gas and lava drops, or just all these beings besides the mineral eaters just evolved inside these enormous cave systems. Both seem reasonable to me, so comment down below what you think. But all the recorded history is from cave dwelling on out, and much of their biology became shaped by the subterranean living. But before you think that's proof that they must have always been subterranean, keep in mind that, like we saw with the Nycto species, in the galaxy far, far away you can get rapid biological divergence in thousands of years, not millions. Their height could range wildly from 1 to 1.8 meters, or 3 foot 3 inches to 5'11", making me wonder if this directly coordinates to the height of certain cave areas. Temperature differences caused humidity and water to form deep in the tunnels, and their facial jowls are called dew flaps because they captured moisture which was absorbed right through the skin. Although most species thought these flaps all looked the same, most Sulustans could tell the difference, and each was as individual as a retinal marker or fingerprint. To make themselves stand out even more, they would get tattoos, and the very few that could were known to grow out their hair. It is stated that they only grow hair on their face, and yet we have a few females that have this long hair. Breaking narrative here for a bit, it took me an hour to sort this out. A very odd feeling once you realize how long you've been spending on this, but it did end up making sense. During the late Republic and Imperial era, corporate power was so absolute that everyone essentially was just working for SoroSuub. Combine that with the gray monotony of the Empire, and the Sullustans were struggling to express themselves. They put a big emphasis on how good someone could look, and as they mingled with the human-dominated galactic community, they got a love of cosmetology and styling wigs for hair. They end up having a lot of human-style hairdos, and these skills with their hair, makeup, and tattoos made them galaxy-renowned. The species with no hair on their head became a staple in the hairstyling field, taking the #1 spot from the Wookiees, and by 6 ABY, their guild, the Barbers of Sullust, were able to buy up all the major haircutting franchises in the galaxy. Back to their adaptations, their enormous eyes let them see up to 20 meters in the dark, and incredibly well in dim light, and were not sensitive to infrared, a combo that allowed them to do things like reading and building, and of course hunting, in what to humans appeared to be pitch black darkness. And perhaps dwelling in these underground labyrinths produced one of the greatest memories of any species in the galaxy, as they were known to be able to navigate a path after looking at a map only once. And these cave systems were so complex that aliens would never risk exploring down here without droid assistance. Their hearing was also exceptional, and one of the saddest notes of any species out there is that these pitch-dark subterranean dwellers relied on their hearing so much that if one was born with hearing impairments, none of them lived very long. Some became just too easy prey for those cave creatures mentioned before, but most of them took their own lives out of despair, from not being able to communicate well, nor enjoy their culture fully, as Sullustans loved to tell jokes and stories, and had a huge focus on musical instruments. Though they could see well in the dark, the cave acoustics and low light created a people that were all audiophiles, so when one was isolated in this silent existence, it proved too difficult to bear. As for their family structure, it would roughly stay the same for thousands of years, each familial unit being called a Warren clan. Females without a mate were called femmes, and most would choose a husband around the time they could reproduce, and now we're in a status of ready. Once they became ready, the female chose their husband, and over their lives, most would accumulate several husbands. All of them would live together, and the female would normally stay home and raise all their kids, while the men went off to their respective jobs. It must have been that the children all took the wife's surname, and all surnames were 4 letters long when translated into Basic. Their language of Sullustese was one of the hardest to learn for other species, while some physically couldn't produce these sounds. And historians note that there are some Warren clans that have nobility titles in their name, but they have no memory or recorded history of any time of a monarchy, claiming that they were always a democratic people. Similar to early evolutionary history, the question of whether they dwelled above or below, this too seems to have been lost to time, and everything points to this being on purpose. As if some group restructured society in response to some emergency, they developed a new sort of cultural origin myth. A myth that worked in a really impressive way, as they were absolutely dedicated to free market capitalism, believing this was the best way to innovate and efficiently distribute resources, but also believed that this worked because they were not greedy. All species described them as outgoing, friendly, intelligent, and pragmatic, and it seemed obvious to them that free markets produced the best and most products, but also that you wouldn't hoard, and you could help others be successful in business, seeing that wealth grow throughout your Warren clan, city, and all of Sullust. As for religion, there was a pantheon of gods, but the only one we know of is Triac, the goddess of chaos, who would be revealed up through the Imperial era, and like how the female was the head of the clan, this goddess was worshipped as the merciful Warren mother of all of Sullust. Their views on the afterlife are not clear, but they did have a large emphasis on burial rites, and they did hold the event of death with great ceremonial reverence, and called death the eternal sleep. Presumably, this must mean that the dead were not seen as completely destroyed or non-existent, and the ceremony would be structured around the important people in the deceased's life. The mourners wore different colored tabards for their relation to the deceased. The crypt master would lead the ceremony, and after the body was placed in the cave wall, everyone placed a transparent steel block in what was called the tomb walling ceremony. These glass blocks were formed in the lava fields above, and may have been seen as connected to the goddess, and they had the practical purpose of allowing the loved ones to see the body or casket. It isn't explained how or even if the body is prepared or packaged in any way. The first to place the blocks were the children of his immediate family, going from youngest to oldest, up to their own parents, then the males of his Warren clan, followed by extended family, close friends, and later during SoroSuub's dominance under the Empire, they inserted themselves here, always having a company representative there. Since so many came to work for this company, a corporate superior was seen as their work family, and then last was the person considered to be their closest friend. Usually this was the spouse, but it could just be a best friend. This person gave a speech in at least as many words as the years the person lived, with Sullustan seeming to have similar lifespans to humans. And this was specifically not supposed to be a eulogy, as all there should know the dead intimately, and instead was supposed to be, quote, forward-looking and coming from the heart. If it wasn't, this was one of the only times you would see these happy-go-lucky, practical joke-loving people turn into brawlers. Any deviance from this was said to lead to heated confrontations, and the same procession of loved ones was done for birthdays, weddings, and holidays, each with some special symbolic act that they all partook in, like the Gallery of Ancestors, housing the Catacomb of Eminence, which were the resting places of important Sullustans across time. As their civilization grew, they started carving out their own tunnels, connecting the caves in this rocky subterranean superhighway, and established beautiful cities. First contact with an alien race is not recorded, and they were commonly seen along the Rima trade route by around 5500 BBY. And it seems like they either created their own spacecraft and explored out on their own, or were contacted by the Jedi Order way before the Republic ever officially interacted with them. Because Sullustans were crucial in the development of the lightsaber's final form, helping on the technological side to move it away from this corded weapon called the proto-saber. Once off-worlders came to visit Sullust, they quickly spread stories of the dangerous blackouts from volcanic explosions that made it hard to see through the black smoke, as well as the static buildup that could produce deadly bolts of lightning. But the unique beauty of these cave cities and their rich range of products from the galaxy-renowned markets and restaurants brought people of every species to this seemingly inhospitable world, making the most of the galactic trade network to create better products here in these caves than most other lush, rich worlds out there. One of these fine products was Sullustan Wine. It may be either very strong, great tasting, or both, because it was really hard to get a Sullustan drunk, and they did not suffer from hangovers, even if they blacked out like a volcanic storm. This wine was so remarkable that when connoisseur and playboy Lando Calrissian finally decided to settle down and propose, he chose a Sullustan wine to celebrate this special occasion. Though that plan didn't work out, at least he had a nice drink. It was the mark of an upper-class establishment to have some bottles in-house, and it was the medium through which one of the most important events in galactic history occurred.
The droid brought out a third, then a fourth bottle of the Sullustan wine. His eyelids began to flicker and close, and his breathing slowed, Plagueis unsuspecting and asleep. And he moved in a blur. Crackling from his fingertips, a web of blue lightning ground itself on the Mune's breathing device.
There were also a ton of attractions that popped up, like the Seri Serrano pod racing course, the therapeutic green mud hot springs of Perengisi, and the lava ride that was the only thing like it in the galaxy, where they would put tourists into thick, transparent steel bubbles, drop them into active volcanoes right before they popped, and they would burst out and float down the lava streams, and be picked up and returned to ship via tractor beam. This evolved into a sport like soccer, using these bubbles and playing right near the volcano opening, a sport that was seen as too dangerous by many, but was a staple in the world of sports betting. By 1000 BBY, their moon Nunb was strip mined, and this led to a boom in their starship manufacturing, leading to SoroSuub Corporation. This entity would become the peak expression of Sullustan culture, combining their endless curiosity, relationships with all sorts of alien species, raw mineral resources, and photographic memory that made them excellent engineers, scouts, and pilots. He would become a major player in the Commerce Guild and had a seat on the Trade Federation Directorate in 33 BBY, a year before the Battle of Naboo. Shu Mai, the presidente of the Commerce Guild, once said, quote, "Sullust shines as a nova of capitalism. Their goods and services grew to the point that the standard of living on this lava world ended up being one of the best in the galaxy, especially when you consider that there were no hopelessly destitute, abandoned parts of their civilization like on Coruscant." But the growing tensions of the decade from the invasion of Naboo to the Battle of Geonosis would turn their culture into an evil direction. The Republic at this time had no military, so in order to combat the growing number of pirates, the Senate allowed private companies to build larger and larger fleets. Corporations essentially became states with their own militaries, employing and protecting millions. And so this led to the Senate allowing corporations like the Trade Federation to have a seat in the Senate. This precedent carried over to Sullust, and a constitutional amendment allowed SoroSuub shareholders to vote in Sullustan Council elections. By now, the population of Sullust was 18.5 billion, and 50% of them worked for SoroSuub. When the Clone Wars was declared, Sullust was one of the most powerful worlds in the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Even though most of the ships and droids were produced by the Quarrens of the Free Dak Volunteers Engineering Corps, or by Horish, Kessel Drive, and Bactoid Workshops, much of the raw material and high-end electrical and mechanical parts could be traced back to Sullust, or the many moons and asteroid belts of this star system. Around this time, the capital of their world changed their name from Balorum to SoroSuub Central, but once the Republic became the Empire, they would struggle to fulfill contracts, as all Imperial production was focused through long corrupted channels like Kuat drive yards, and the Empire wanted dictatorial power over all production. And though Sullust claimed to support Palpatine in name, their combo of free markets and local democracy was not something the Empire wanted to work with. There were plenty of companies willing to bribe politicians, and the board members of SoroSuub watched as more and more companies were taken over with bogus claims of Imperial security issues. This was a major problem on worlds like Lothal. So to get ahead of this, in 2 BBY, Chairman Suub approved the Corporate Proclamation 137D, which essentially made him the Emperor of Sullust. And he made a public proclamation of allegiance to the Empire and gave a powerful denouncement of the Rebel Alliance. This perversion of their mercantile and conflict-avoiding tendencies sparked the first widespread civil unrest on this world. Sullustan City grew from the increased pressures from their corporatocracy, where anyone speaking out against the company was seen as traitorous and essentially exiled from major cities. Sullustan became a haven for free thinkers and saw a cultural explosion of new art, music, inventions, and philosophies, something unheard of in the time of the Empire. But what's still crazy is that what's considered an independent city bragged that it had less than 30% of its people working for SoroSuub. Still incredibly high, yet everywhere else was now near 100% working for the company in some capacity. Imperial influences continued to poison the culture, and for the first time in their history, Sullustans would be forced into labor, housed at the worksite, and not be allowed to leave. With slavery on Sullust, millions were now plotting to help the Rebel Alliance, the most notable being Cyan Tev and Nunb, but they were smart enough to try and keep it small scale and local for as long as they could. Ted was adamant that they'd not get tied to the Alliance, but when the Empire kidnapped many top Sullustan engineers, and then Tev himself was kidnapped, only for all of them to be freed by Alliance agents, he agreed to help them, but still hoped to hide any connection. That is until 4 ABY, when his resistance was able to overthrow the Imperial supporting board members, and using this rule by owners vote to become dictator, he officially announced that Sullust would join the Rebel Alliance. This was just months before the Battle of Endor, and it would have signed a death warrant for his people if the Rebel Alliance failed. The ISB always had a complex, deceit-filled plot to meet these threats, and instead of overt military action, they had Sullustan mercenaries attack powerful rebel Bothan Borsk Fela, playing on intel they picked up that most Sullustans harbored a deep disdain for the Bothans and their spy network, which was known to sell off intel to protect themselves, and they possessed intel on Imperial movements that could have saved countless Sullustan lives. This caused such a rift in Rebel Alliance command that it might have resulted in the second Death Star plans never reaching Mon Mothma. But luckily, the Sullustans and Tev were exonerated, and it was all exposed as an ISB plot. Nunb would safely secure his future place in the Catacomb of Eminence, becoming a hero to his people, being the co-pilot of the Millennium Falcon that helped take out the Death Star. Tev would use his power to reverse the SoroSuub corporatocracy, and would be one of the initial signatories of the Declaration of the New Republic. While the markets were open and free, these people were pragmatic enough to see that the issue was with the leaders, not the system, and most were still proud of what SoroSuub could do, rapidly producing a powerful New Republic fleet, with a large percentage of the officers in the NRDF being Sullustans. From helping to produce the modern lightsaber, to being the lifeblood of Starfleets, these fun-loving, hard-working, and caring people were crucial to protecting the galaxy from the time of the Old Republic up through the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. That's it for the breakdown, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind-the-scenes stuff. The Sullustan Din Tinray was born deaf, but with an experimental ear, she was able to live normally and hoped to save others from that sad fate. But there was another problem ever since Sullustans moved off-world. In all this daylight and artificial light, it began to damage their corneas starting around 30 years old. When Imperial presence was heavy on Sullust, the rock renders thought a buffet opened. They were drawn to the delicious plastoid composite in the stormtroopers' armor. As Leia explained, they're rock renders, not flesh eaters. They can't resist the mouthfeel of dense minerals, such as stormtrooper armor. When the Sullust resistance group was growing deep in the convoluted cave system, they used Drutash grub folk remedies, grinding these up and putting the ooze on things to stop parasitic infections. And there is this creature, the Hep-Maga Miord species, which was produced in a fan art competition, but was officially stated as a canon sentient species that also once inhabited Sullust. My headcanon is that, like with a lot of proto-humans, they were wiped out by early Sullustans, perhaps when they moved into the caves. Real-world birds are known to eat ashes, gaining important trace minerals and large pieces as grit to grind food in their gizzards. This was most likely the inspiration for the ashbird. Nunb was puppeteered by Mike Quinn, who also worked on Dark Crystal, and he suggested that the face be puppeteered as well. Filming the scenes in the Falcon were extra difficult. He had to lay on his back and look at a monitor to see how Nunb was moving. This character got his name from being the 9th puppet shipped to London, with the other B-Wing pilot called 10 Nunb, like number 10. When Nien left for the rebellion, he stole the SoroSuub freighter he was piloting, which was called the Melcrawler, named after an odd creature on Sullust that would keep stinking long after it died. Nien's voice came from an intern of Skywalker Sound named Kipsang Bill Rodich. The Sullustese is actually his Kenyan Kikuyu dialect, so he's just reading the line in English, "What are you doing over there? All of you please come here," while some of the other laughs and sounds were just improv. The moon Sullan was shown in Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, and while Sullust was mentioned in Return of the Jedi,
what of the reports of the rebel fleet massing near Sullust?
It was first seen in the Rogue Squadron game, and then in the Clone Wars during the Battle of Sullust, where Ventress was betrayed by Dooku. Though the most in-depth look planet side was from Battlefront, and the art team said they based this look on Iceland. Some people don't think there were any Sullustans in the prequels, but there was one in each of the films. They're just always off in the background. A lot of information for this came from the Star Wars Atlas, RPG sourcebooks, guides to planet and moons, and guide to species. The best way to help me out is to hit that like button, comment down below, and share this video. Subscribe if you want to see more, and be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon, and special shout out to our $25 tier supporter, Oscar Jones. But most important of all, remember, don't judge a planet by its appearance, or a Sullustan by their dewflap, and the Force will be with you, always.